Hello, welcome to your second to last assignment. This is the second part, or part two of Object of Meaning, and this part is called Time Capsule. And I know that some of you are still working on your balancing project, project number 6, and that is okay. You just need to have that in by next Monday, the 18th. And this project is not going to be due the following week. It is going to be due our last week of school. So I will have the dates for you at the end of this, but you just need to start thinking about this and start working on it because it's a continuation of the project that you've already hopefully started and is going to be the capstone or final project where you bring this full circle into a time capsule that you are going to archive for your future. So the first artist that we're going to look at is Nathan Ober. And Nathan is a friend of mine that I went to school with and then was fortunate enough to have two interactions with him where I did a time capsule art. It was actually an art project that he did where he first I was couch surfing at his place in Santa Cruz. This was at a point when I came back. I had graduated from school from UC Santa Cruz and went back to teach a electronics and physical computing class and was couch surfing with him and other friends in their flat in downtown Santa Cruz. And at that time, it was Nathan had decided to do a time capsule that they buried underneath the house that we were all staying at. In that particular time capsule, he had a theme where you would take some sort of form of technology, any kind of technology. I believe I gave a cassette tape, I think, if I'm remembering properly. And he buried it underneath the house. And then a couple years later, I wound up at an artist residency. And an artist residency is something where there's different places all over the world that have artists come there, live there most often for a period of time, and create artwork. And so it's sort of like a controlled space where you have time to really focus on what you do as an artist, and often they are international. So I was at this residency with people from Japan and Australia and China. I'm trying to think of where else. South Africa, Canada, and you share ideas, and then you go work on your artwork. And at the end of the period, in this case, it was a month. You have a show. And so what Nathan did at that artist residency was he collected things from people to put into a time capsule to be opened 100 years later, which he buried on at the residency. And he also had an audio recorder that he passed around from person to person, and you would take this box that he had, and you would go sit somewhere by yourself and do an audio recording. And so that audio recording also went into a thumb drive with those audio recordings, went into this archive. He has also since created another project where he is doing a podcast called Escucha, which you can find on Spotify. And that to highlight, he's actually been doing these audio recordings at various residencies. I believe he was in Colombia is when he started it. He did it in Finland, and then again in Big Sur, and he's probably doing it in Joshua Tree where he lives now. So Nathan buried this box, and it was a really profound experience. There's a lot of other artists. We did a procession. We created this sort of impromptu band to bury it. The Finnish press came out and interviewed him. And it is now permanently entombed on the Artelis Artist Residency site in Tampere, Finland. So it just so happened that a couple miles away from where this artist residency was, there was a work by a famous American artist named Agnes Stenz. And Agnes Stenz was known for doing environmental pieces as well as writings and theory about art and the environment. She she conceived of Tree Mountain in 1982, and in 1992, for World Environment Day, the government of Finland announced that it would provide her the funds and the place. It was an old exhausted gravel pit to create this monument And this was completed between 1992 and 96. And I'm just going to read one section. She has a writing about this piece, but I'm just going to read you a little excerpt from that writing. Tree Mountain begins its existence when it is completed as a work of art. As the tree grows and wildlife takes over, as decades and centuries pass, Tree Mountain becomes a fascinating study of how the passing of time affects a work of art. It becomes an instrument that measures the evolution of art. Through changing fashions and beliefs, Tree Mountain can pass from being a curiosity to being a shrine, from being the possible remnants of a decadent era to being one of the monuments of a great civilization, a monument not built to the human ego, but to benefit future generations with a meaningful legacy. Tree Mountain is a living time capsule. This next artist creates artwork that often deals with surveillance or different sort of unseen military and militaristic things in our landscape. However, this piece was somewhat of a departure in that he created a collection, he curated a collection of 100 photographs taken over time to be embedded onto a disc that was placed onto a satellite and then sent into orbit. And it is meant to be something that survives well beyond humanity, so that it is a record of a partial record of us at this place in time.
Something very remarkable has happened over the last 50 years. This is the period of spaceflight. People have been putting things into space. And over the course of the last 50 years, we've put hundreds, thousands of satellites into orbit around the Earth. Most of those satellites are in relatively low orbits, between about 300 to 1,000 kilometers, but certain kinds of communication satellites are in a very different orbit. They're at an altitude of about 36,000 kilometers, and at that height, they don't experience any atmospheric drag at all. When you look at the celestial mechanics of how those orbits work, it turns out that they're stable. They'll never come back to Earth. They're never going anywhere. And when you take a step back and think about that, you realize something very remarkable has happened, which is that over the last 50 years, the humans have built a ring around our planet, not unlike the rings of Saturn. But instead of being made out of dust and debris, the ring around Earth we've created is made out of machines. And what's more, this ring is now a permanent part of our planet. The communication satellites we've put into orbit around Earth will remain there for billions of years until the sun becomes a red giant 4 or 5 billion years from now. These are the real monuments of the contemporary moment. The Last Pictures is a project to mark one of them, a collection of images that might explain something about why these spacecraft are there, and maybe explain something about what happened to the people that made them and why the people that made them are not there anymore.
This is a somber project in many ways, looking down at Earth when we're gone. A haunting kind of shadowy project. But it's so smart that way. And it's so critically powerful, and it isn't about art. You know, it's not some arty about art project. It's really about us as people trying to put ourselves in check about the fragility of us on the planet. And that kind of commentary, I think, is so powerful for art to give to the world, right? That it is to say, you know, outer space, as much as you might think it's about science and facts, it's a world of myth and dreams and delusion. And in a sense, this project is an opportunity to have a little corrective criticality up there.
I think the Artifact Project really confronts the question of what it means that in the last 100 years, humans have become the dominant geomorphic agents on Earth, that is, the dominant force that's caused significant ecological and geological changes to the planet. I think it's in this sense that the Artifact Project is a kind of cosmic message in a bottle. We're used to thinking about time in terms of hours or years, but I think the project really asks us to think about a deeper time beyond the human by encoding information about our presence on Earth in materials whose lifespan, in a sense, will be possibly greater than ours, while ironically on things that were made by us.
From the beginning of the project, many of us were really wary of any gesture that would be or appear to be like any attempt to represent humanity, as if that's some stable and monolithic entity. And so when we were thinking about, okay, without context, you really can't get any meaning out of these images, so why choose? You know, what is, you could send a kitten or a bomb. It's there, without context, there is no difference there. And we started thinking about that, and I think that was an interesting moment. And one of the things we thought about was sort of that the idea of curation is important, and selection was, the process of selection was important, whether or not there's any message or meaning to ultimately be gleaned from the collection.
First question, how do you make images that can last for billions of years? Is there any kind of media that is that archival? Fortunately, João Ribas at MIT invited me up there to be an artist in residence and introduced me to some material scientists, and we thought through this question of how can we make images that will last for as long as the sun, if not longer.
So anything that we wanted to make the artifact out of, anything that we wanted to put around the artifact, such as padding, right, that would allow it to survive launch, needed to be materials that satellite companies had flown before. Right? And so silicon has been up in space many times. Great choice. It was allowed us to encode a high density of information. So there are standard tools and processes that have very commonly allow us to put high densities of features or physical information. And secondly, then it is a ceramic, which is going to be more resistant to any of these diffusive processes, which tend to destroy, if you will, the encoded information.
The design philosophy behind this really primarily was about practicality, and this project came along 9 months before launch. So we had maybe 2 or 3 weeks to meet all of these requirements that normally you have years to meet. And yeah, in the end, we passed all of these tests. We did make it through. I mean, we were holding our breath when we sent these things off to have them tested, and we were all greatly relieved when we heard that it passed.
We didn't have a satellite, and the idea was to attach an object to a satellite, so I went about trying to find satellite companies that would be interested in working with us. You have to have a satellite that's going to go up within the next 6 months to a year. You have to, so it had to be on our timeline, and they had to be interested, and we had to figure out how to convince them to do it for free, because otherwise it was going to be cost prohibitive. And then I just started cold calling them and asking them if they wanted to work on an art project and let us attach an object to their satellite, and they inevitably said no.
Eventually, Ann Pasternak met Chase and Chris Ergen, who put us in touch with the EchoStar company, and they got interested in it and agreed to let us use their spacecraft as a host vehicle for our project.
I immediately liked the idea because I've seen, 15 satellites go up from EchoStar, and every one of them has been pretty much strictly business related. And so the idea of putting some kind of art project, at the time I didn't really have any concept whatsoever what the project was about. But I liked the idea. And then once I realized I liked where Trevor was at, made a couple of calls. It seemed like it would be feasible time-wise for Echo 16, and we went from there.
This has been a very difficult project to work on for a lot of reasons. There's years and years of work that went into this before we had any clue or any idea that this might actually be possible. So in a lot of ways, There was years of literally dedicating oneself to a dream with the hope that that dream might actually happen.
I was working on this in Berlin. This was fabricated in Ohio and then hand-delivered to California. Finally, ultimately, it will be launched from Kazakhstan. So this thing has been bounced all around the world at this point. This project, it required extraordinary effort from a lot of people. I think everybody involved really had a personal investment in seeing this happen. Without that, I don't see how it could have happened.
We do public art. This is a public art project in outer space. Kind of hard to get there. It's pretty small, not even going to really be able to see it. So in many ways it's very esoteric in that sense. So we always were saying, what is the terrestrial version of this project? How do people actually engage with it? Well, it's through conversations, through dialogue, it's through a kind of rich discussion about the implications of the work.
Like many of the things that I and others around MIT participate in, our hope for this project is to create a greater awareness of science and technology and how they might be used to solve problems and how to engage in opportunities for the nation and for the world.
The significance of the human impact on Earth and the particular time that I think that we are existing in, which is, this interesting threshold in which we can both see, we have the tools and the technologies to see and understand things about the world that we live in. But we're also at the threshold in which the technologies that we have to do something about it are coming up fast against this kind of inevitable conclusion of how we got here.
People, going through and learning, kind of like I was able to, more about themselves in a way through, and the human race through taking a journey through these 100 pictures and potentially thinking about, what that means for them and what that means for us. Where do we go from here?
Oh, do I think aliens will find it? I hope they do. I don't know. I don't know if I hope more that aliens find it or that at some point when we have to clean up the geostationary orbit because there are too many satellites floating around there and in the graveyard orbit, that somebody finds it. I think it'd be cooler if humans found it in the future.
The Last Pictures is a document of this historical moment, but it's not meant to be a representation of humanity. It's not supposed to speak for everybody. It's a very particular kind of document, one person's impressions about what the world might look like at this particular moment. And in a way, that's all we can ask out of art. What I want out of art is things that help us see who we are now. And the best I can hope for is that this project will give us a way that we can actually look at ourselves.
So for the final artist, we're going to look at the group Ant Farm, who's a group of radical architects, designers, and media artists active from 1968 to 1978. And they're most well known for Cadillac Ranch, which was a bunch of Cadillacs that were buried face down in the desert in Texas, like Stonehenge, and also Media Burn, where they drove through a bunch of flaming TVs. The members were Chip Lord, Doug Michaels, Hudson Marquez, and Curtis Schreier. And they also did a lot of time capsules, including a refrigerator that they buried and a media van. And then also the piece that you are about to see, which is a car that they buried getting a group of people together to collect their objects in 1975. And this is selections from this video. This is not the complete video.
This is Eyewitness News. There's a man at Art Park who's got some unconventional ideas about freezing time. Eyewitness News reporter Donna Fowler has more.
Doug Michaels searched through 50 used car lots for this $250 1968 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, which he plans to bury for 25 years. That's right, bury. But not before he fills it with 30 suitcases crammed to the brim with artifacts of the culture of 1975. A sort of modern-day time capsule. Doug is a member of Ant Farm, a San Francisco-based organization which works on non-commercial projects like this one, which he says will extend man's vision and awareness so that he may truly examine his culture and communicate his values to future generations. The elaborate September 7th burial plans call for the car to be encased in a ferro-cement coffin 11 inches thick. Among the categories of capsule contributions he's soliciting, from 3 to 7 daily at the Art L and Art Park, are relics of art, media, nature, weapons, sports, shelter, and sex.
We want it to be more personal than other time capsules that have been put away in the past. So we want things like things that are really, important to people personally, like scrapbooks, family albums, home movies, slides, diaries, things that really show the way people actually lived in 1975 and the things that they were thinking about.
One of the other things that's going into this time capsule is a videotape of our newscast tonight. So we're just think, 25 years from now, on September 7th in the year 2000, audiences will thrill once more to the sound of your voice saying, and finally... This is Donna Fowler, Channel 7 Eyewitness News in Lewiston, New York.
Members of 3 Buffalo area painters union locals have voted to accept
Today we are able to participate in another ceremony in the burying of this time capsule. I'm sure that we're all going to return here in 25 years and be amazed at the progress that has been made on this site in that time. So on behalf of the Village Board of Trustees and Mayor Schuster and all the residents of Lewiston, I thank you for allowing me to participate.
I'd like to get a photograph of all the citizens that are here today in front of the time capsule. And in order to do that,
we tell them all to pose for a movie.
who are you with? The Channel 7 newsman has asked me to ask you to wave to the folks out there in TV land.
Wave to the year 2000.
Wave to the year 2000. See you in the future. Have a nice trip. This is the name of this suitcase is Junk Media. Print. Saturday Evening Post. A mail. October. We.
No.
They put in an envelope of secret ingredients. It's iPod TV.
No, they're going in.
I've used it a lot. I've used it a lot before, and after about a year or two, yeah, it'll just peel off.
doing? The red square has to be right around the center, right?
The Citizens Time Capsule Donor Informational Profile Forms. Confidential. It's now being sealed.
Let me write this on the center. Is that in front of the
Suitcase number 27. A summer suit by Johnny Carson Clothes. I'd like to thank Winks Men's Store in Niagara.
So I have seen a lot of excellent examples of collections. These are just a small sample of what I've seen online from the things that you've collected around your home and have placed in the bags. Please make sure that you have things that you don't mind burying or putting away for a long time. So you might have to trade some things out that you've collected. But once you have your collection done, the next thing you're going to do is find a container of some kind. That can be a box, a really sort of thick plastic bag, just sort of shoebox, something that you can fortify and make strong and make, if you're going to bury it outside, then you need to wrap it in plastic. One of the best time capsules I ever heard of was a cooler that someone I know buried for with their high school graduating class, and then came back 25 years later and dug it up. And the cooler, wrapped in some plastic bags, worked really, really well because they actually buried it in a parent's backyard. But just find something. You don't have to bury this. It can be hidden away in a closet somewhere, or underneath the stairwell, back in a garage or a basement. But just find a somewhat secure place that you're not going to run into this. So what you need to do is find or create some kind of box or container for your bags. Continue collecting your bags until you have 20 and place them in the container. And then you need to do this before the date, before it's due. And then what I want you to do is write on the box, do not open until, and then whatever your graduation day is. So for different students, that's going to be different days. So write do not open until, and then write your graduation date. And then place this wherever it is that you're going to place it to save it until that day. I want you to document this process in either photographs or video, or both. But please make sure that you include one photograph of all of the bags and one photograph or multiple photographs or video to show us the process of sealing up your archive and placing it where it is going to be archived or held until you unearth your time capsule. This is due on June 1st or 2nd. So you will have one more project after this. You still have due today technically, but by next Monday, the balancing project. So there is a little bit of flexibility with that project that can be due. I will not be upset if I receive that balancing project by next Monday. Then this will be something that you continue to work on until the end of the trimester. And next week you will get one more assignment. That will be the inflatable. But hopefully this allows you a little bit of extra time to complete all your work. Please let me know if you run into any problems. And just let me know ahead of time anything that is becoming difficult. All right, I hope you have fun.